I just showed you this before the show, talking about the bots over there on the left that collect the information, the algorithms that activate it, put it into the display level, which is the AI assistive engine. Somebody wins the click, somebody wins the client, then we serve them through our business OPIDC, codify it, and loop it back through into the bot. What do you think of this as an approach and a presentation?
In my opinion, it's a great conceptualization, visualization, and also simplification too, because every letter here actually deserves maybe 100 pages normally. But when you just treat them as like DC or DSCRI, it is getting easier basically to explain people to the steps and also to explain to them how a tool possibly is working as well. And you also do a kind of classification here between probably the traditional bots or probably the new nature of the large language models or the different type of retrieval systems too. So in my opinion, it sounds very complex, but also simple as well.
Super. And the algorithmic trinity, that's kind of my favorite part. I was talking to some people at Google, and I'm talking about the LLM, the search engine, and the knowledge graph, which is the three technologies that go together to build an AI assistive engine. And at Google, they were saying, well, an LLM is intelligence, a search engine is information, and then knowledge graph, I've added the term verification. How do you feel about that?
It's actually sometimes very funny that your vision and my vision is always that parallel, because in my system too, I call something like SERP Triad, but slightly different. In that SERP Triad, what I mean is basically some results or some efforts are just for basically web document ranking, passage ranking, or passage indexing, we can also call it, and also, of course, the passage generation and being cited in the passage. It tries to basically tell that if you don't rank your document, your passages are gonna not be extracted, or they are not gonna be ranking. And if your passages are not indexed, then actually generated answer is not gonna cite you back. So it tries to actually have a kind of document ranking, passage ranking, and retrieve generated passage citation as 3 steps. And yours there also, in a way, there is a kind of familiarity, I can tell.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I talk about recruitment and saying, well, each of the LLM, the search engine, and the knowledge graph are recruiting content from the index, and they all have different needs and different aims.
That is also true, of course. For that, actually, recently, I still don't have any proof that actually shows markdown files are being retrieved better by LLMs. But it makes sense to try. So we started to use dynamic rendering to serve large language model agents, markdown version of a site, and according to the user agent of the LLM, we change the markdown too, because GPT preferences or Claude preferences or Perplexity preferences for the content might be different from each other. If you see that, for instance, GPT is citing a passage or a document more frequently according to the dates above, or according to certain type of named entities it actually mentions, we try to adjust small differences according to the agent differences as well. And since these files are solely for the LLMs, it doesn't harm for Google side as well. So it's not like cloaking, or it's not like cannibalization too, because markdown files are still not indexable by Google. And we don't open these MD files to the Googlebot either too. They are just solely for the large language models.
Oh, wow, well, you've just blown my mind. That's delightful. You mentioned that ChatGPT likes entities. Can you give me a very general overview of the 3 and what they prefer?
I'll be happy to do that. I have some internal SOPs, and some of them are coming from some researchers, and one of them actually is coming from a research called Veni Vidi Vici. Veni Vidi Vici means actually I came, I saw, I buy. It's like also a name of browser, and this browser is trying to do experiments for agentic retrieval and agentic search. And the research found out that, for instance, GPT is, when you search for basic, let's say, Apple Watch, GPT is trying to retrieve content from a different site than the cloud. So even if you give exactly the same prompt, their preferences are different from each other. Even actually which product they choose on the category page is different from each other. GPT, for instance, usually chooses the first product in the category. Cloud is choosing mostly third and the fourth. According to these behavioral changes of LLMs, we are trying to basically change the content according to. And in our case, if the related entities are appearing earlier in the document, especially including the dates are usually weighted heavier too, we are trying to bring them earlier for GPT. When it comes to the cloud, it is a little bit probably having maybe more context window there, and it doesn't increase or change the citation that much in the same way for the cloud. That's why different versions of the same MD file can be given to the different LLMs.
Okay. What about Perplexity?
The Perplexity is a little bit like between these two, I can say. Basically, whatever I do for GPT and the cloud, I try to go with the balance or these two, because it doesn't have a very strong difference from both of them. It's usually between them, I can say. For instance, in GPT, if we have a date, especially a recent date, let's say today's date is appearing in my URL, GPT is actually retrieving that document more frequently, but cloud doesn't give the decision in that way. Probably GPT is having harder time for cost, and that's why they just check the URL, and if they are certain, if there is a certain threshold or confidence on the URL in terms of relevance and updateness, then they take the content of the URL. Cloud is a little bit more generous. They are not that much eliminative, or they are not that much hesitant to get the full content and check the further documents too. But in GPT instance, if the top of the document is not exceeding a certain threshold, they don't take the further down segments, I can say. So they have different behaviors or thresholds. And statistically, we can see.
Brilliant. And that's just brought me to the next point, which is cost of retrieval, which is something you talk about a great deal. And I was talking about Google as a child back in 2015 in France, in French. Yeah. And Google as a child, it was saying, okay, it wants to learn. It's your job to help it to learn. And if you help it to learn, it will be nice to you, basically. And if you're empathetic, and I at one point said empathy for the devil, and saying, or empathy for the beast, if you're empathetic to its problems, and you solve those problems or help it solve those problems, it will be kinder and more generous to you. So I said, well, one of the problems is the cost. It's a business, it's trying to keep costs down. So if you help it reduce costs, it's going to help you. I didn't know about cost of retrieval. Can you explain?
Of course, I'll be happy. And that's why I said, actually, we always think the same things, actually, and with different personal styles. So the cost of retrieval actually came out first, at least for me. I was reading a book from Tristan Upstill, a Google engineer, well-respected. And he was always talking about the cost, actually. He was talking about cost of indexing or cost of crawling or cost of understanding, cost of serving and cost of testing. So it wasn't like actually about quality. It was always about the cost. And I started to actually think about if they already have one website or one web entity that actually satisfies a topic, it means that actually they would be less willing to find a second source, because the first one already saves them from all these extra costs. They can trust one website or one web entity for an entire topic, and they can satisfy all these users and set of queries. So the cost of retrieval is a commercial term, because Google, at least to me, it is an ads company, not a search engine as the first thing. They always make most of their money from the ads, meaning it's the ads company, and search engine is attached to the ads, basically. And which means they want to make money and the profit always, meaning that while they are trying to increase revenue from the ads, they need to decrease the cost from search engine side. Which also means that whichever web entity or the source gives everything for a cheaper cost for them, it means they will prefer that. So rather than actually your quality, your cost is more important. If your quality is here, but cost is here, it doesn't matter. Technically, your quality should be higher and the cost always should be lower. In terms of also clarity of the content or clarity of your layout or your visuals and everything on the site should be able to explain itself with small hints earliest as possible, so actually they can understand that, yes, it is worth to run all these expensive algorithms. Pamdu Nayak also in the DOG leak file said that they are not running every algorithm for every site. And in fact, if you don't have any clicks, for instance, they are not running rank brain for you because it's expensive. And they wait until you get the clicks until they actually run these expensive algorithms for you. So meaning that you might be having a better content, but until Google actually sees that you are worth that cost, they won't run these expensive algorithms for you to understand you. So,
which is why, I mean, I've heard a lot of people telling me that you keep talking to them about get at least one click, because that's when they're going to invest money in you.
True. The clicks and the query log sessions, meaning that if you have really huge amount of impressions, or if you have just a little bit clicks, then they start to actually see that there is a reason to check this site and check actually whether it is satisfying or not. But if you don't have clicks or impressions on the enough level, it doesn't matter for them whether you are doing something perfect or whether you are actually missing some details, because from Google's point of view, when you look at the search engine result pages, there are already satisfying results. They don't need one more website to satisfy better. It's not going to make more money for them. So they have to see that you are getting the clicks, and then actually they can start checking your site better. That's why usually I prefer exact match or partial match domains a little bit, because this way you are getting clicks earlier for a new project, which means Google also can check your site earlier too. But if you go full branded domain, it might take even longer duration of time until they see that it is worth to invest in that site.
And so a company like Kalicube, we need to be established, and we have the authority, so we're okay, but a new company wouldn't have that.
You will need longer duration of historical data, existence in the query logs, and probably a wider number of query terms that you need to rank for, so that actually you can gather that trust signal. That's why in Topical Authority framework that we created, first we try to get actually 10,000 impressions a day. Because usually we saw that when you come to a certain level of impression level, especially for new websites, Google start to actually test you for new SERP features, or they start to actually crawl the website more frequently as well. And if that first click data is positive, then you start to get a positive ranking state. Step by step, website actually starts to rank better and better, and you keep accumulating this trust. And with a core update, you can replace the current sources, basically.
Right, and I mean, I'm just thought about LinkedIn, for example, where people say to you, get the first impressions, get the first engagements. If you can get that over the line in the first, whatever it is, 500 impressions, then you get spread out to a much wider audience. Obviously not exactly the same thing, but it's the same principle. Push it out there to a certain extent, see how well it performs, and if it's performing well, expand out, and if it's not, drop it.
That is true, actually, yeah. And also the first engagement with the users and also the search engine, in my opinion, is the riskiest point. That's why sometimes, for instance, I create a website, but I disallow Googlebot fully. And I start actually linking that site, but I don't allow Googlebot to see that. Then I also start to actually send traffic to the site. I'm sharing it in the newsletters or social media, and traffic is also coming to the site, but I still keep blocking the Googlebot. In my experience, in the past case studies too, that actually drives Google systems crazy, because everybody else can see the content, but not the Google. And once your website is ready, let's say with 80 or 90 well-structured documents, when you allow Googlebot to crawl the site, they run every type of algorithm directly, and they start trusting the site faster. They directly index it, and they directly start ranking that. There are this type of sometimes project launch tricks that actually can be used as well. And it is again actually coming back to the cost angle too, because from Google's point of view, if Microsoft Bing can show your content and Facebook even can show your content, but Google can't, it actually puts them into a risky position, and they have to close that index gap. And that's why actually they are becoming very much more tolerant to your first version of site, and they directly start indexing and ranking from there too.
Wow. Okay, now that gives me two things to say. Number one is, as you were talking about that, I had an image of a dog at the door scratching to try to get in. And I know you like cats, so I'm sure that's pleased you.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, the next question is, if I have a new category on my website, and I do the same thing with just a category on my website, and I block Google from that category but let everybody else in, would that potentially have the same effect?
It will be, especially if there is a contextual breach between these two. Let's say you have a company for QR code generation, and then you want to bring also digital business cards, because digital business cards also have QR code in that. If there is a kind of holonym or antonym or synonym type of relation between these things, because QR code is part of the digital business card, meaning that actually there is a holonym and meronym relation between them. If there is a kind of relation, and if there is a query path, meaning that if somebody who searches for a QR code, let's say 2 months later, they also search for the digital business cards, meaning that actually there is a connection between them. These type of extra topics are safe to process. And if you don't have enough level of page rank, if you don't have enough level of brand awareness or brand prestige as well, it will be harder to have multi-irrelevant topics on your site. But when it comes to Forbes, for instance, or when it comes to the CNN, these companies existed before internet even existed. So for them, it's okay to talk about, let's say, even Forbes today has a direct iGaming review section in their site. And they also talk about, let's say, I don't know, female wellness. There is no relevance between them. But they rank for both of it because their page rank is possibly one of the highest. And their popularity is also one of the highest as well. So removing Forbes from the Google SERP today would be killing Google's popularity. So Google can't give up from some of the sites, because if you remove Forbes today from Google, then people search for it from Bing. So they can't send their users to the Bing to find the Forbes. So some sites and some brands are above these rules. We have to admit it. But when it comes to the new sources or new establishments, yeah, they should create a kind of level of relevance between these things. I can give a site name, for instance, pricelisto.com was a website actually hit by helpful content update. We moved all the content to the chunked subdomains, either for countries or either for actually services, because earlier fitness gym prices and the catering service prices, they were in the same domain. Now, when we moved them to the subdomain, they actually are separated. And with that, the website actually recovered. Because when you put these, let's say, less relevant content to a different section of the sites, Google is actually able to tolerate that. And we just actually use it. And it's a live example that people can directly check also.
Brilliant. So segmenting your topics makes total sense. And if you're not a prestige brand, which I love as a term, then you need to stick on topic and make sure that everything's related. Yeah. But when you talked about PageRank and prestige brand in the same phrase, differentiate the two.
I would be happy to do that. The PageRank is actually very simple. It shows your centrality and popularity in the link graph. There is a link graph, and most of the links are either going through you or they also centralize you. But it doesn't mean that you are a very strong brand at the same time, because you might be, your PageRank might be here, but people might not be searching for your name at all. Meaning that actually your PageRank doesn't reflect your importance there. So Google can actually still crawl you better and try to rank you higher too, but that attribution is not coming from your brand directly. I believe it was coming from Jeffrey Dean, a very fundamentally important Google engineer. He had a concept called source term vector, which is actually connecting to my concept of source context. Source term vector meaning that Google assigns some concepts or some terms to the brand directly. And if this concept or the term is in the query term, that site directly gets a boost of ranking. And usually this coming from your reputation and query co-occurrences and how your company is actually being defined at the same time. I even remember the example from the patent. He was giving an example for, I believe, the Chicago Chronicles can rank higher for, let's say, sports scores or the football scores, basically, because it was having a long term of history and long term of query search demand for it. That historical data makes it more trustworthy. And whenever there is a term like score in the query term, that site actually gets a boost of ranking directly, which is actually a kind of primitive version of topical authority at the same time. That's why we are trying to assign a central entity to a source context, so that actually you can get a boost of ranking for that topic whenever a query is assigned to that topic.
Wow, cool. And Andrea Volpini was talking about analyzing LLMs and seeing when the neurons spark with that association of a topic to an entity. And he sent me his analysis of what Kalicube gets and what WordLift gets. And it's really interesting. And it's this, basically the idea is saying, well, it's like word association in people's brains. The LLM is going, ooh, when somebody says brand SERP, it goes ping, and Jason Barnard's name pops up in its little brain.
That's true, actually. Yeah, definitely true. Usually, to keep things simple for my team, I try to give them the simplest actions. For instance, if you go and use the quotation marks, and let's say we use quotation mark with your name, Jason Barnard, and with the quotation mark we use, let's say, knowledge graph. If you see that the total number of results are, let's say, 500,000 there, then we search another entity or person with the same term, knowledge graph again, and the number of the results is just 1,000. Meaning that actually on the web, there are so much documents that are actually mentioning you together with this topic. And of course, it's not just the mention, it's also relation to. There will be lots of different triples in these relations as well. And the level of page rank and level of recency of these documents also matter too. But technically, these document statistics will be helping a system, or in this case, system search engine, to understand which entity or a person is more related to which topic with what type of relations. I usually tell my team basically use these quotation marks or co-occurrence search and see which brand is appearing more frequently for what topic on the web. And what is the average page rank or average recency of these documents as well. I believe in LLMs too. It is affecting too, because when we do right now some, let's say, backlink campaigns, it's not about the link anymore. In our case, we actually focus on mentions, declarations, and co-occurrences to change their answers. So rather than the page rank, we focus on actually consensus in a way, we can say.
Yeah, which is train the algorithm or educate the child.
Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, we're now talking about, I used to talk about educate the child that is Google, it wants to learn, blah, blah, blah. And now I realize I'm actually a businessman. So I need to talk about train the untrained Salesforce. They're selling for somebody 24/7, train them to sell for you.
100%. I believe actually the many things that we discussed, like let's say for the last 6 years, it became a huge business model today. Like for instance, recently we are getting a prompt model called the 3 top, I call it, meaning that actually, let's say, which software is best for QR code generator? We put colon, then we write 3 attributes, let's say design, style, and speed, or cheap, or whatever. We get all these 80, 90 different attributes from, again, Google, and then for an entity type, then we try to multiply the 3 attributes with different combinations. Then we try to see which entity is assigned to the which group of attributes as the best. And from there, we try to also change what we are publishing so that actually we can get higher appearance rate for every possible combination of attributes in the query or augmented query as well. And this is actually what you mentioned for years ago as well, when not just for actually asking who is the best, but also asking, let's say, who is best for XYZ, who is best in what region, etc. And you need basically, you need a kind of, let's say, a document or a published piece of content at somewhere on the corner of the web or universe to back you up for that specific answer that you are looking for.
And one point about that is who coined the term answer engine optimization? Sorry, go ahead.
I believe you, because you talk about it like this, maybe even 7 or 8 years ago, actually. I remember that you were writing about answer engine optimization.
Well, and that was the point, is I talked about it 9 years ago in a white paper with Trustpilot at SEO Camp. Then I talked about it at Brighton SEO. But the first proof is an article by Rebecca Sentance on Search Engine Watch in February 2018. And what I've actually done is made the statement, I coined the term answer engine optimization, and refer back to that as the temporal proof.
True, actually. In a way, at least from consensus point of view, I can tell that I believe that one of the best researchers there is coming from Min Jee Woo, 2008, it is dated, corroboration-of-web-answers, that the research paper. And it is talking about scoring the answers. And I believe fundamentally what today's LLMs are doing is exactly coming from there. When it comes to scoring an answer, it is actually coming from not just the answer, but also the source. Just because a source has higher level of page rank, the systems like NLP systems, like LLMs or search engines, they can actually weight that specific paper more. And also, just because a document is so old, let's say a 2018 February document, might not be weighted enough in 2026. Meaning that actually the consensus that you are creating will need to be always amplified as well. So whichever result you want to see, you should repeat it and amplify it regularly, so that actually the threshold always can be actually kept fresh. Because otherwise, somebody, for instance, can publish another document, and in my opinion, they can also trick search engine to think that, let's say I publish a document today, but with some certain data points that I can play with, I can make the system believe that the document is actually from even 2016. And from there too, I can actually start again tricking the search engine to believe whatever I want them to believe as well. But I clearly remember that actually the term is coming from you. I was reading it actually from you, like even in my experience, it was 7 years ago or something, I remember. But your history is going beyond my experience. So it can be 10 or 9.
No, I mean, as you said, I was talking about it when we met in 2019. I've been talking about it since 2017. And sorry, one of the things that keeps coming up is recency. So it does mean you have to keep walking the walk. You have to stay out there. You have to keep publishing.
True, because if all the, let's say, I actually call it document statistics and query statistics. Let's say there is a collection of documents, and the answer that you look for is usually coming from 7 years ago. And all the last 3 years old documents, they are actually saying opposite of previous documents. In this case, search engines actually, they will be giving more weight onto the latest documents rather than the first one. Because the latest ones are, let's say, more immune to the web decay currently. And a very old document, which doesn't get any clicks anymore, and also probably that website will be getting very old too, and probably it's not also updated as before too. So as a source and as a document, it goes weaker through the time. That's why, since the web always needs to be refreshed, you also need to actually keep amplifying that result all the time. Otherwise, they might be tricked. And also, as I said too, I can imitate an old document too. I can buy an expired news website from 2017. Again, I can publish a new document like it is very old. I can also link it from 2014 aged documents too, meaning that from very old documents, I am linking a new document that pretends like old. I am 100% sure and experienced already that we can trick search engines to think that, okay, this document was actually old, but they just found it recently, but it is actually old. So you can actually manipulate the answers from old documents and also the new documents as well. I prefer.
And that's the point, is if they find an old document, the assumption is, I just hadn't seen it before, not that it didn't exist before.
That is true, because it's very hard to prove from their point of view when actually it is published for the first time, and the system can actually miss it. There is also a patent called information retrieval based on historical data. Even Matt Cutts is included in that research. And according to the system, they even keep the history of a document until like 12, 13 versions. Meaning that if a document actually has been changed today, they know the past versions too, and they score all of them together. But when there is a new document that pretends like the old, there is no other previous version at all. So it starts its life cycle from there, but like an old document directly. Since it is getting lots of links from old websites, and the data is in that way too, and you can directly actually trick them. And in the patent, they actually say that for some queries, not the fresh ones, but old documents are more important, especially evergreen queries or factual queries, we can say. And according to that, you can manipulate both of them, basically.